up there specifically to look after sites that I'm planning on putting onto my layout. We have been there many times in the past. When we lived out in Wyoming, we were up there a lot. Made me very much involved in the area of modeling in Montana, basically the BNSF highlight in the Whitefish, Montana area. Next slide. I'm going to cover the 3 areas of building that are going to be on my site, on my layout. There was a very large aluminum company smelter in Columbia Falls, very large, and its purpose was to create aluminum for the wartime frame, so on. It was huge. It was very, very environmentally unsound, and it created all sorts of problems in the end of time when it became a toxic super site. But nonetheless, it was an extremely important element to the development of railroading in that area. And so I will have on my layout a model of the smelter itself. Next slide.
He's going to have a super.
Here is an aerial site of that smelter in 2009. It has been reduced to only the left-hand side, half side column where the white pieces are. It has been reduced to that. Everything else has been removed, buried, and is gone, excluding all of the electrical stuff that's in the front, all of the electrical power line machinery that are coming down from the Hungry Horse Dam, where they got their power to make all this aluminum. I cannot understand why that's all still standing. It would seem to me to have a lot of resale value, but it's still there. Okay, next slide. The next slide is the other of 3 major elements that I'm going to have in my layout. And this is the Stoltz Land and Lumber Company. It is a very large, basically lumber mill, where they do all sorts of stuff for cutting lumber and everything else. But they are also, you'll notice, in the land business, and they have a huge amount of land up there, and they are taking all of the lumber for this plant and taking it out of what they own in land on the site. Next one. This is the headquarters building, and I will model it. It's a standard kind of log frame, wood sections on the outside, but it'll be a part of the section of the layout that is going to have this lumber yard on it. It's a feature of it. You see the front of my rental car there. I had a truck. Nancy and I drove around in a truck up there, brought back a lot of memories from Wyoming. Next scene. This is this will be on there. It's not much to have to do, but you get some value out of the fact that it's there on a plan. This is the incoming truck scale that the trucks drive over to measure how much wood they've got on their truck. Next slide. And you got to look at this picture and look at it really carefully. That's a log loader, a log unloader that's taking the logs off of a truck that's gone over that scale. Look at the size of that load that loader is taking off of the truck. And it's almost not possible on this picture to give you the feeling of how big that thing really is. It is huge. And it just lifts them off like there's nothing there. Next slide. The third portion of this layout is going to be a copy of the Amtrak depot that's in Whitefish. So Columbia Falls and Whitefish are nearby towns. They join together with a relatively short segment of track, and they are the 2 towns that will be represented in my layout. Whitefish is the very big BNSF site, including an Amtrak depot that is back from the 1920s. A good friend of mine who's running the convention in Michigan for the National Convention in Detroit was a person who worked for Detroit Edison, and Detroit Edison had contracts with BNSF to deliver coal. And he was able to get for himself copies of the exact drawings of this layout of this building. And he kindly reproduced them for me, and I have them sitting on my desk over on my right-hand side. And that's what I'm using as my building prototype material. It is an extremely ornate building. You can see all of the intricate work that's on it. It's going to be a masterpiece, probably my crowning glory and the end of my modeling career. Next slide. More detail. Notice the uniqueness of some of the building. On the right, left-hand side, notice the whitefish and above. That whole section is raised up and out from the building and constructed into the roofing with circular heavy-duty woods and all the rest of the stuff. Next detail. Next slide. This is the street side, a rather boring side of the station that everybody sees when they're coming up from town, not from being in the yard, which almost nobody could see, what we just saw, except people on the train. But the same kind of detail is there without the intricacies of the pieces that I talked about earlier. But notice it's all stucco, it's all wood, and it will be it'll be an absolute pleasure modeling this thing. Next slide. This is the east side detail. It'll have the exits, fire exits that are on the system. The ladders going down from it. Next slide. West side detail. Again, the same thing. Basically, a lot of the whole detail. I would like to draw your attention to the middle of the screen near the top and look at the supporting corbels that are on there to hold that roof up and all of the rest of the stuff. That issue is exclusively what caused me to want to go out and get pictures. The drawings did not do that in any kind of detail for me. But now I have real live pictures of what that looks like. And my buddy Frank Stevenson has promised me that he's going to help me build those corbels with 3D printing. And there's probably about 5 different varieties of corbels that are in there in different places. I'm going to give you an estimate. I think there's at least 75 to 80 corbels that are on this building. In end scale, the building will be 15 inches long by about 6 inches wide. So think about the scale reduction that takes place and how you have to get in and do all of these kind of little technical details to make this thing happen. Next slide. We're beginning to look now at some of the details that I was out there to get pictures and photographs of. This is that section that I told you was out in front of that whole piece, in the middle, above where you would normally have the windows for the train station looking outside of it. And look at the detail. I can't use a pointer, but look at the detail that's around the top of it, and all of the rest of the stuff. All of that's going to be made as a single piece and inserted into the unit, and be about 4 or 5 feet scale away from the main part of the building. Next detail. Again, these were originally intended to be flower boxes, and those are underneath. This detail is underneath several of the windows on the layout, and again a smaller corbel supporting all of these pieces that stick out. Note the pigeon wires, okay? I'm not going to be doing that. Okay, that's way beyond end scale. Next detail. These are some pretty heavy duty units that support the extended roof that comes out from the top, of course. You'll notice that the roof ends somewhere in the neighborhood estimate of about 3 to 4 feet below the roof. So those corbels stick out somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 feet by 5 feet in size and scale, and are supporting basically the entire extension of the roof. Next detail. This is something that I wish somebody would get the smart idea of doing this 3D dimension kind of device that's out in front of the station. Notice the back, the station in the back. This is in kind of a yard out in front that's in public space. And it's a young boy who's talking to an engineer. And it is so symptomatic of what we are all about, trying to make kids understand what railroading is all about. I would love to have that as a 3D, piece that I could put onto the thing, but I have no mechanism under which to do that. That's just a unique piece. Next slide. Okay, into a front part. Most of you know that I really do like to chase trains a lot. And this is my fun part. So next slide. And I'll go through these pretty quickly. This is a GE version ES44C4, Summit, Montana, a high-speed intermodal coming into one of the major cross points at the top of the pass, Maria's Pass. Trains are moving here in Notch 8, probably about 20 miles an hour. And you can just feel the power as they're going past. Next slide. This is coming into Belton, which is the station that's on the west side of Glacier National Park. And it particularly is a westbound grain train. We were there in what they describe as the grain season. They are running grain trains through there, one right after another, heading to ports like Vancouver, Washington, and Portland, and Spokane, Spokane, Spike, all sorts of grain going over to Asia. One right after another, probably every 5-10 minutes, there's another train. Next slide. Whitefish is a crew change place. And so I had an opportunity to take pictures of crew changes taking place. And this particular section, this was a westbound train. He geared up in Shelby, Montana, and he departs in Whitefish and then continues from Whitefish to Spokane. It takes that long to cross over the pass at 20 miles an hour that it becomes a relatively short distance, but a lot of time. This is one of the really fun parts of the trip because you can sit there and you can talk to these guys. They really don't want their picture taken too closely, and I honored that. But I had some fabulous conversations with them about what their job was like and all the rest of the stuff. Next slide. Same thing here. Lots of back views, no face views. Next slide. This is a eastbounder coming back from the Pacific coast, and it is an eastbound intermodal, and it is coasting in for a crew change. The crew area, the crew change area, are a bunch of buildings that are to the left that you can see there. They will all be modeled on my layout so that it comes as close as I can to showing what that's really all alike. And I have 2 tracks on my layout that are dedicated to crew change and Amtrak passenger service. Next slide. Here is one of my mid-visits to one of my favorite spots out there in Red Eagle, Montana, which is a fantastic place to sit and take pictures of trains coming through the high mountain pass. Unfortunately, you can barely see it, but there is a tied down BNSF train parked there. That for some reason, there were 3 of them all parked on one of the double main tracks all the way to Whitefish, meaning it became a single line traffic and cutting the traffic down dramatically because of it. And I was never able to get any reasons for why they had those trains tied down, but they did, and it was really making a mess of the schedule. Next slide. Here's the brand new booth that's new to me from my trips out there in the past. This is because of positive train control. These were all established as much more modern ways to communicate the information that takes place at these very busy crossover points at Red Eagle. Next slide. This is West Belton. West Belton is the earlier picture that I had was a westbound. This is an eastbound coming into West Belton. It is at the western edge of Glacier National Park, and it is where it converts from 2-track down to one track down to 2-track, in this instance going east. And this is an eastbound intermodal. A lot of intermodals coming back eastbound. A lot of them going back the other way, and you can tell they're empty because they usually only have 1 engine on the front, maybe 2 engines on the front, nothing in the middle or back, because they're empty and they're taking the empties back to the West Coast. Next slide. This is a really neat picture. This is where they're coming out of the beginning of the run up towards the summit from the east, and you'll notice the lower mountains here. This is probably about a 1.5 to 1 3/4% grade. It's a double main, and these guys are pulling here a manifest, and it is probably something in the neighborhood of 125, 130 cars long, and those engines just absolutely pound when they go past you. Next slide. Got to have an Amtrak picture if you've got a picture with a Whitefish. These are the new Charger engines that are becoming very popular now out west and replacing the PM42s that were mainstays for so long. This is a bridge over the Java River at Java West, and it's an outstanding place to take pictures. It is a significantly long single track bridge that is fed by I've got a mind slip now. When they put 2 tracks alongside of each other to have eastbound and westbound separated, it has that kind of a track in it and is very unique. Next slide. Westbound empty grain coming from the West Coast. Again, coming in for a Whitefish crew change. That's a state highway that goes over the top of the yard. Next slide. A standing, waiting for a crew to come on board of a ES44AC in crew change wait. Next slide. This is a really very popular picture place to take pictures of because you get the mountains in the background and everything else. This is just west of West Belton as it leaves the Glacier National Park area. It is coming downhill, even though here it looks like it's uphill. But great pictures of the mountains in the back and the engines. And these are pulling grain cars. Next slide. Okay, this next picture is something that is simply good for the soul. Okay, let's see it. This is a huckleberry bear claw pastry purchased in a small, tiny little town of Polebridge, Montana. with my hands holding onto it, and notice the bear claw, five fingers on the left hand side of the unit, and an outstanding way to spend a little bit of time with your wife while you're watching trains that don't show up. And so that's how I end the presentation. Next slide. Any questions?